The air on Zerona was a tapestry of tension, thick with the tang of scorched metal and the earthy musk of alien flora. Nightfall crept across the jungle moon, draping its bioluminescent canopy in shifting hues of green and blue. The rhythmic chirr of unseen creatures rose and fell, broken only by the occasional distant crackle of a dying electrical circuit. Captain Adrian Holt adjusted the strap on his tactical pack, his boots crunching over the blackened remains of an outpost that hadn't fared well in the day's chaos. He moved cautiously, his senses heightened to every flicker of motion and stray sound. Zerona's beauty was deceptive. Beneath the glow of its twin moons, the jungle concealed countless threats: razor-winged predators, sinkholes that could swallow a mech whole, and the ever-present possibility of enemy scouts lingering in the aftermath of the skirmish. The battle had been brief and brutal, a firefight erupting in the humid twilight, human forces clashing with the enigmatic Locrians. But what had started as a small skirmish quickly spiraled into a frenzy of misplaced explosives and frenzied withdrawals. By now, both sides had retreated, leaving the battlefield silent save for the intermittent buzz of a broken beacon. Adrian paused, scanning the wreckage ahead. A faint glimmer caught his eye, a soft pulse of light emanating from beneath a collapsed structure. His visor pinged the source as metallic debris, but there was something wrong about it. His HUD couldn't identify the material, and the readings flickered like static, unreliable. "Commander." Adrian spoke into his comms, his voice low. Only silence replied. The storm of EMPs earlier had scrambled most signals. He was alone for now. He moved closer, his gloved hand brushing aside a tangle of jagged steel beams and luminous vines. The light dimmed, then brightened again, almost like a heartbeat. He crouched, his breath slow and deliberate, and found himself staring into the strangest pair of eyes he had ever seen. The creature was small, no taller than his knee, with scales that shimmered like liquid mercury, shifting colors as the light played over them. Her head tilted, oversized eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver through him. She didn't flinch or retreat, though her body seemed to ripple subtly, as if ready to dart away at the slightest provocation. "What the hell are you?" Adrian whispered, his voice barely audible. The creature chirped, a soft, melodic sound, and then tilted her head the other way, studying him with unnerving focus. Her legs were tangled in a mess of alien wiring, greenish fluid leaking from the shattered conduit she was caught in. For a moment, Adrian hesitated. There were countless regulations about interacting with unidentified lifeforms on the battlefield, most of them involving quarantine and careful observation. But something about the creature's gaze, intelligent and pleading, overrode protocol. With careful movements, Adrian unclipped his knife and sliced through the vines. The creature chirped again, more insistent this time, as if warning him of something he couldn't yet comprehend. The instant she was free, the air around them changed. A faint hum rose, a vibration so subtle Adrian almost missed it, like the jungle itself was holding its breath. The creature darted backward, still watching him, but now pacing with an agitated energy. "Easy," Adrian murmured, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. She didn't run. Instead, she reached forward. No, not reached. Pointed. Her clawed finger jabbed toward the wreckage behind him, where shadows gathered ominously. Adrian spun, weapon at the ready, scanning the darkness for movement. He saw nothing at first, just the endless sprawl of shattered machinery and overgrowth. But then he heard it, a low, mechanical whine, growing louder, accompanied by the faint blue glow of a powered system activating. His heart pounded. The battle was supposed to be over. Every Locrian unit had retreated, or so the reports claimed. The glow sharpened, coalescing into the unmistakable silhouette of a drone, sleek and predatory, its design far more advanced than anything Adrian's forces had encountered before. Its targeting array scanned the area, and the hairs on the back of his neck rose as the beam passed over him. "Shit," he hissed, ducking into cover. The creature darted after him, pressing her small, shimmering form against his leg as the drone's sensors swept past. She chirped softly, tugging at his pant leg with surprising urgency. Adrian glanced down at her, bewildered. "Got a plan, little one?" She chirped again, her tone sharper, almost scolding. Then, to Adrian's shock, she turned and darted toward a nearby console embedded in the wreckage. Her small fingers moved with astonishing speed, tapping at the keys with precision that no mere animal could muster. The drone whirred, its sensors locking onto her movement. Adrian cursed under his breath, readying his rifle, but before he could fire, the console erupted with a piercing pulse of light. The drone's engine sputtered, its sleek form faltering mid-air, before crashing unceremoniously to the ground. The jungle fell silent again. Adrian lowered his weapon, his gaze shifting between the smoldering drone and the small creature now perched atop the console, staring at him with what could only be described as a smirk. "You're not just some stray, are you?" he muttered. The creature chirped once more, her tone playful, almost mocking, and Adrian felt a creeping realization settle over him. Whatever she wasn't what he thought, and whatever had just happened here on Zerona, it was far from over. The Resolute Dawn groaned as its engines powered up, a deep, resonant hum reverberating through the ship's hull. The frigate's interior was a labyrinth of dimly lit corridors, its systems straining after the chaos on Zerona. Adrian Holt strode down the main passageway, his boots echoing against the cold metal floors, his mind consumed by the small, shimmering figure trailing behind him. Mina, he had started calling her that, if only to make his mounting confusion feel manageable, ambled with a strange mix of curiosity and defiance. Her oversized eyes darted around the ship, taking in every flicker of a panel light and hiss of steam from worn-out conduits. Every so often, she'd let out a soft chirp or whistle, her alien language as incomprehensible as it was melodic. Adrian's fingers brushed the comms device at his hip. The signal was still scrambled, thanks to the EMP blasts on Zerona, and he hadn't yet been able to report his discovery. Part of him wasn't sure he wanted to. "Captain Holt," a gruff voice called, pulling him from his thoughts. Lieutenant Reza Verdun leaned against the entrance to the operations deck, his arms crossed. "We've got multiple malfunctions in the aft section, engine outputs fluctuating, and the diagnostic AI's having a meltdown. Whatever you brought on board, it's got the tech spooked." Adrian glanced back at Mina. She was perched on the edge of a bulkhead, her claws tapping rhythmically against the metal as if testing its integrity. "She's not causing it," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Verdun raised an eyebrow. "She, huh? We bringing pets into war zones now?" Adrian felt a flare of defensiveness rise in his chest. "She's complicated." "Complicated or not, Command's gonna want answers," Verdun said, his tone sharp. "They don't like surprises, and neither do I." Adrian didn't respond. Instead, he motioned for Mina to follow and stepped onto the bridge. The ship's main deck was a chaotic blend of flickering monitors and haggard crew members scrambling to keep systems online. The air smelled faintly of ozone, a telltale sign of overloaded circuits. Mina wasted no time. She darted to the nearest console, her movements precise and almost mechanical, and began tapping at the interface. Adrian opened his mouth to stop her, but hesitated. "Let her," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. The crew stared, their murmurs a mix of confusion and unease. Verdun moved closer, his voice low. "You're letting an alien tinker with our systems? Do you have any idea what she's doing?" "No," Adrian admitted, "but she's the reason we're not in pieces on Zerona right now." The words settled heavily between them. Verdun's expression darkened, but he said nothing. Mina chirped suddenly, her tone insistent. A nearby monitor flickered, its readout shifting from garbled nonsense to a clear, ominous display. "Unidentified vessel detected. Approach. Vector, 37 degrees. ETA, 22 minutes. Adrian's stomach dropped. "Verdun, report." The lieutenant snapped into action, barking orders to the crew. "Scan the vessel. Identify its class and allegiance. Shields to full power. and reroute non-essential systems to propulsion. Already done, Mina chirped. Every head on the bridge turned to her. Adrian felt the weight of their stares and stepped forward, shielding her from their scrutiny. Focus on the incoming threat, he commanded, his voice firm. But his own focus wavered. The vessel on the screen was sleek and angular, unmistakably Locrian in design. Smaller than a battleship, but far more advanced than the consortium's patrol craft. It moved with an eerie grace, as if it were a living thing, and Adrian knew instinctively that it wasn't here for a diplomatic visit. Weapon systems coming online, Verdun reported grimly. They're locking onto us. Evasive maneuvers, Adrian ordered, gripping the edge of the nearest console. Mina, can you? She was already moving, her clawed hands a blur over the interface. The Resolute Dawn shuddered as she rerouted power to the engines, propelling the ship into a sharp dive. The Locrian vessel responded instantly, unleashing a volley of plasma rounds that streaked past the frigate's hull, narrowly missing the aft section. The impact of a near miss rocked the bridge, sending sparks raining from an overloaded conduit. Adrian grabbed the comms mic. Engineering, stabilize the main reactor. We can't take another hit like that. A burst of static answered him before a frantic voice cut through. We're trying, Captain, but something's pulling power faster than we can compensate. Mina chirped again, this time a sharp, almost irritated sound. She pointed to the screen, where a schematic of the Resolute Dawn glowed faintly. Adrian followed her gaze and saw the problem. An auxiliary conduit in the lower decks was siphoning power to an unknown system. Verdun cursed. That's impossible. That conduit's offline. Has been for months. Not anymore, Adrian muttered. Mina darted toward the exit, her movements urgent. Adrian hesitated for only a second before following her, Verdun close behind. They raced through the narrow corridors, the ship's vibrations growing more intense with each passing moment. They reached the auxiliary conduit just as a low, resonant hum filled the air. The panel had been pried open, exposing a mass of wires that pulsed with an unnatural greenish light. Mina didn't hesitate. She leapt onto the console, her claws slicing through the glowing cables with surgical precision. The hum ceased, replaced by an almost deafening silence. Adrian's comms crackled to life. Captain, a voice said, breathless but relieved. Reactors stabilizing. Power levels are normalizing. Before Adrian could respond, Mina turned to face him. Her expression was unreadable, but her gaze carried a weight he couldn't ignore. You knew this was coming, didn't you? He asked softly. She chirped once, her tone flat, almost resigned. The ship shuddered again, though this time it wasn't from enemy fire. Adrian's mind raced as he considered the implications. The Locrians were hunting her. That much was clear. But why? What had she done to provoke them? And what was her connection to the mysterious system she had just disabled? Questions swirled, unanswered and unrelenting. Adrian's instincts screamed at him to get her to command, to let the higher-ups decide what to do. But another part of him, quieter but no less insistent, told him to keep her close. The Locrian vessel was still out there, and Adrian had the sinking feeling that whatever Mina was hiding, it was only the beginning. The silence in the Resolute Dawn's operations deck was thicker than any plasma shield. The Locrian vessel still loomed on the sensors, a dark predator circling its wounded prey. But the tension was not from the external threat alone. Adrian Holt's thoughts churned as he stared at Mina, her alien form perched on the edge of the auxiliary conduit she'd disabled. Moments ago, she had saved them from an unexplained power drain that had nearly crippled the ship. The Locrians hunted her, that much was clear. But now Adrian couldn't shake the feeling that the Locrians were not the only ones keeping secrets. Mina shifted her weight, her large, glimmering eyes fixed on him with unnerving calm. She let out a single chirp, almost questioning. Adrian crouched to her level. You want to explain what that thing was? He gestured toward the now silent conduit, wires frayed and faintly glowing. Her head tilted, a flicker of amusement in her expression. She tapped the side of her head, then pointed to his. Adrian sighed. You understand me, don't you? You just refuse to talk." Mina's chirp turned into a trilling hum, her version of laughter. Then, to his astonishment, she reached for the datapad clipped to his belt. Before he could stop her, she tapped on its surface with shocking precision. The device lit up, and a message scrawled across the screen in English, jagged but legible. "Not safe here, we need to leave. Quickly." Adrian's pulse quickened. It was one thing to suspect intelligence. It was another to see it displayed so clearly. But before he could respond, the comm system crackled to life. "Bridge to Captain Holt," Verdon's voice barked. "That Locrian ship just lit up like a solar flare. They're charging weapons. I don't think they're interested in talking." Adrian rose to his feet, his voice firm. "Maintain evasive maneuvers. Divert all available power to shields." "Already on it," Verdon replied, his tone strained. "But there's more. That thing in the auxiliary conduit, it's not just some random malfunction. We pulled some old schematics. It's a Locrian device, Captain, and it's been here for months, maybe longer." Adrian's breath caught. "What?" "I'm telling you, sir. It's integrated into our systems, like it's been here all along. Whatever it is, it's Locrian tech, and it was siphoning power for something big." Adrian turned to Mina. Her playful demeanor was gone, replaced by a focused intensity that made his stomach twist. "You knew about this," he said, his voice low. She nodded, her claws tapping the datapad again. "Old trap, not mine. You're in the way." The words hit him like a punch. Adrian was no stranger to intrigue. Espionage, sabotage, hidden agendas were all part of war. But this felt different. The Locrians had planted something aboard the Resolute Dawn, a device Mina had not only recognized, but disabled with ease. And now they were coming to reclaim it, or destroy it. The ship trembled violently, and Adrian stumbled against the bulkhead. Mina steadied herself effortlessly, her claws gripping the metal. The comms flared again. "Direct hit on the starboard shield array," Verdon shouted. "We're losing power fast. Captain, we can't take much more of this." Adrian clenched his fists. The Locrians weren't letting up. Whatever their intentions, they were ready to obliterate the Resolute Dawn to achieve them. He turned to Mina. "You want to leave? Fine. But if we're getting out of this alive, I need more than vague warnings. What's on this ship that they want so badly?" Mina hesitated, her gaze dropping. Then, slowly, she tapped out another message. "They think it's me. They think I activated the trap, but I didn't." Adrian frowned. "You're saying they're after you because they think you're a threat?" She nodded, then added, "Not just me. You too now." The implications settled over him like a lead weight. Whatever Mina's role in this conflict, her presence had made the Resolute Dawn a target, and Adrian knew the Locrians wouldn't stop until they had her, or destroyed everything in their path. The ship rocked again, alarms blaring. Adrian steadied himself and barked into his comms. "Verdon, get us out of here, now!" "Hyperdrive's offline," Verdon replied grimly. "Whatever that device was doing, it fried the core. We've got one shot, venting plasma and using the shockwave to propel us into the asteroid belt. It's risky as hell, but it might buy us time." "Do it," Adrian said without hesitation. Mina chirped, a sound that might have been approval. She leapt onto his shoulder, her small frame surprisingly light, and chirped again, pointing toward the bridge. "You better know what you're doing," Adrian muttered, sprinting down the corridor with her clinging to him like a second shadow. On the bridge, the crew was a flurry of motion, their faces pale and tense. The Locrian ship loomed closer on the main display, its weapons glowing ominously. "Plasma venting in 3, 2, Verdon began. The ship jolted as the maneuver engaged, a deafening roar filling the air as blue flames erupted from the aft section. The Resolute Dawn lurched forward, the sudden acceleration slamming Adrian against the console. Mina clung tightly to his jacket, her claws digging into the fabric. The Locrian vessel fired again, but the blast went wide, its targeting systems unable to compensate for the Resolute Dawn's erratic movements. The asteroid belt loomed ahead, a chaotic sea of tumbling rocks and debris. "Brace for impact," Verdun shouted. The ship plunged into the belt, its shields flaring as it scraped past jagged rocks. The Locrian vessel hesitated at the edge, unwilling to risk pursuit. Silence fell, broken only by the distant hiss of damaged systems. Adrian exhaled slowly, his hands trembling. Mina leapt down from his shoulder, her gaze fixed on the main display. She chirped once, then pointed to a small, blinking icon on the edge of the screen, a distress signal. Adrian's chest tightened. The signal wasn't theirs. "Captain," Verdun said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That's a Locrian beacon, and it's coming from inside the asteroid field." Adrian stared at the screen, dread pooling in his gut. The Locrians hadn't retreated. They were waiting, and Mina, for all her secrets, was the key to whatever came next. The asteroid field enveloped the Resolute Dawn like an endless storm of rock and shadow. The frigate drifted through the chaos, its hull battered and shields flickering under the strain of near-constant impacts. On the bridge, the air was thick with tension, a suffocating silence broken only by the occasional crackle of damaged systems. Adrian Holt leaned heavily on the console, his gaze fixed on the glowing beacon pulsing faintly on the main display. The Locrian signal was impossibly close, its source hidden within the labyrinth of tumbling asteroids. "What are they waiting for?" Verdun muttered from his station. His voice carried an edge of frustration, but Adrian caught the fear beneath it. "They're playing with us," Adrian replied, "herding us where they want us to go." "And where's that?" Adrian didn't answer. He glanced at Mina, who sat cross-legged on the deck beside him, her oversized eyes unblinking as she stared at the same beacon. She had been silent since the plasma maneuver, her usual mischief replaced by an unsettling stillness. "Mina," Adrian said, crouching to her level, "you know what's out there, don't you?" She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, with deliberate slowness, she reached for the datapad clipped to Adrian's belt. Her claws tapped out a single word: "Trap." Adrian's jaw tightened. "That's not good enough. Why are they after you? What's this about?" Mina hesitated, her gaze flickering between Adrian and the screen. Then she tapped again. "I didn't make it. I stopped it." "Stopped what?" Adrian pressed. Mina's fingers moved quickly now, the message forming in jagged, deliberate letters. "Device. Their weapon. It was here before I came. I disabled it. They want it back." Verdun leaned over, his face pale. "A weapon? What kind of weapon are we talking about?" Mina chirped softly, a sound that carried a hint of regret. She added one final word to the screen: "Extinction." Adrian felt the weight of the revelation settle over him like a physical blow. The Locrians weren't just chasing her because she was an operative. They believed she had compromised their most dangerous secret. And now they would stop at nothing to ensure no one else uncovered it. The comms crackled to life, interrupting his thoughts. "Captain," a voice from engineering called, strained and breathless. "We've got a hull breach in the lower decks, sealing it off, but we can't take another hit like that." Adrian straightened, his mind racing. The ship was falling apart, and the Locrians were circling like wolves. His options were rapidly dwindling, and Mina's warning only deepened the stakes. He turned to Verdun. "Can we pinpoint the beacon's location?" Verdun hesitated, then nodded. "It's stationary, about 20 kilometers ahead, nestled in a cluster of larger asteroids." Adrian glanced at Mina. "You think we can shut it down?" She nodded, her expression grim. "It's a trap, Captain," Verdun said, his voice low. "You know it is." Adrian met his gaze. "I do. But if that weapon's still out there, if it's functional—" He trailed off, the unspoken consequences hanging in the air. Verdun swore under his breath, but didn't argue further. Adrian straightened, his decision made. "Get us as close as you can without drawing their fire. I'll take a team to the beacon and see if we can disable it." "You're taking her, I assume," Verdun said, nodding toward Mina. "She's the only one who knows what we're dealing with," Adrian replied. Verdun frowned but didn't push back. "Good luck, Captain." The Resolute Dawn's hangar bay was a scene of barely controlled chaos. Technicians scrambled to repair damaged fighters while Adrian prepared for the mission. He donned his EVA suit with practiced efficiency, his mind focused on the task ahead. Mina stood nearby, her small frame almost comically dwarfed by the gear strapped to her back. Despite her size, there was a resoluteness in her posture that Adrian couldn't ignore. "Ready?" he asked. She chirped once in affirmation, then scurried into the scout ship waiting on the deck. The journey to the beacon was harrowing. The scout ship weaved through the asteroid field, its thrusters flaring as it dodged debris. Adrian gripped the controls tightly, his eyes scanning for any sign of Locrian pursuit. The beacon came into view suddenly, a jagged spire of alien metal jutting from the surface of a massive asteroid. It pulsed with an eerie green light, its surface etched with intricate glowing patterns. Mina let out a low whistle, a sound that sent a shiver down Adrian's spine. "What is it?" he asked. She tapped the data pad. "Weapon core, controls nearby." Adrian nodded, guiding the scout ship to a landing on the asteroid surface. The gravity was weak but present, enough to make movement possible without thrusters. As they approached the beacon, Adrian's unease grew. The air, or what passed for it in his sealed suit, seemed heavy with tension, as if the spire itself was alive and watching. Mina moved ahead, her movements precise and deliberate. She reached the base of the beacon and began examining its surface, her claws tracing the glowing patterns. "Can you disable it?" Adrian asked, his voice crackling through the comm. Mina nodded, but her body language was tense. She tapped out a message on the pad. "Not without them knowing." Adrian's gut tightened. "How long?" She held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes? She nodded again. Adrian turned his gaze outward, scanning the asteroid field for any sign of the Locrians. His comm crackled with static, then Verdun's voice broke through. "Captain, you've got incoming. Locrian fighters 2 clicks out and closing fast." "Understood," Adrian replied, his tone grim. He turned back to Mina. "Do it. I'll cover you." Mina didn't hesitate. She began working on the beacon's core, her claws a blur of motion. Adrian raised his rifle, his eyes fixed on the approaching ships. The first fighter streaked into view, its sleek frame glinting in the light of the beacon. Adrian fired, his shot striking the asteroid near its path, forcing it to veer off course. The seconds dragged on, each moment an eternity. Mina worked tirelessly, her focus unbroken even as the battle raged around her. Finally, she chirped loudly, a triumphant sound. The beacon's light flickered, then dimmed, its hum fading into silence. Adrian grabbed her arm. "Let's go." They sprinted back to the scout ship, dodging debris and stray fire. As they launched back toward the Resolute Dawn, the Locrian fighters fell back, their quarry lost. But Adrian knew the reprieve was temporary. The weapon was disabled, but the war it represented was far from over. And Mina, for all her secrets, was now more vital than ever. The Resolute Dawn drifted in a patch of relative calm, the asteroid belt now a chaotic swirl of fragmented rock in its wake. Inside the frigate's dimly lit conference room, Adrian Holt stood at the long, scratched table, his hands braced against its cold surface. The Locrian beacon had been destroyed, its glowing core extinguished, but its implications lingered like a specter. Mina perched on a crate near the wall, her shimmering scales duller than before. The frantic urgency that had driven her actions earlier was gone, replaced by a stillness that Adrian had come to recognize as her version of deep thought. Across from Adrian, Lieutenant Verdun leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "We've bought time, sure. But the Locrians won't just give up, Captain. We've poked the hornet's nest, and they'll come back angrier than ever." Adrian nodded, his gaze shifting to Mina. "What we need to understand is why they went to such lengths to protect that weapon." "Mina?" Her oversized eyes blinked slowly. She tapped the data pad she now carried as if it were an extension of herself. Words scrawled across the screen. "It wasn't just a weapon, it was a warning." Verdun frowned. Warning? Against what? Adrian stepped closer, crouching slightly to meet Mina's gaze. Explain. Mina chirped softly, a mournful sound. Her claws tapped quickly, the message forming. They built it to stop something worse. An ancient enemy. But it failed. I tried to keep it from being used again. The room fell silent, the weight of her revelation settling over them like a storm cloud. An ancient enemy? Verdun's voice was incredulous, but his expression betrayed his unease. You're saying there's something out there worse than the Locrians? Mina nodded. She tapped again. Not gone. Sleeping. If they wake, no one survives. Adrian felt a chill run through him. He had spent his life fighting wars, each one feeling like the ultimate battle for survival. But the idea of a threat so vast that even the Locrians feared it was something else entirely. Verdun broke the silence. So what now? We're just supposed to sit here and wait for these, whatever they are, to wake up. Mina shook her head, her gaze steady. She tapped out another message. Beacon was part of a network. Others still active. Must disable all. Adrian exhaled slowly, the enormity of the task ahead sinking in. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about ensuring that the galaxy itself had a future. The next few hours were a flurry of preparation. The crew of the Resolute Dawn worked tirelessly, patching up the ship as best they could. Adrian coordinated with Mina, using her knowledge to plot a course toward the next beacon in the Locrian network. As they moved through the ship, Adrian found himself watching Mina more closely. She moved with purpose, her small frame exuding an aura of determination that belied her size. Despite the gravity of their mission, she still found moments of mischief, playfully snatching tools from unsuspecting crew members or chirping mock orders over the comms. But there was a heaviness to her that hadn't been there before. Adrian saw it in the way she lingered in doorways, her gaze distant, as if she were remembering something she couldn't quite let go. Mina, Adrian said softly one evening, as they stood in the observation deck watching the stars blur past. You've been fighting this fight alone for a long time, haven't you? She glanced at him, her expression unreadable. Then she tapped her pad. Too long. Adrian nodded, his chest tightening. You're not alone anymore. Mina's chirp was soft, almost hesitant. She tapped one more message. Thank you. The final beacon was hidden deep within a nebula, its swirling gases obscuring everything beyond a few kilometers. The Resolute Dawn navigated carefully, its sensors working overtime to map the treacherous terrain. When the beacon came into view, Adrian felt a surge of unease. It was larger than the last one, its spire surrounded by an array of smaller structures that pulsed with energy. Looks like they upped the defenses, Verdun muttered from his station. Can we take it out from here? Adrian asked. Verdun shook his head. Not without getting closer. And I guarantee the Locrians aren't far behind. Adrian turned to Mina. Can you disable it? She nodded, but her expression was grim. She tapped her pad. Need time. Might be trapped. Adrian clenched his fists. Every instinct told him to run, to retreat to safer ground, but he knew they didn't have that luxury. Prepare the landing party, he ordered. The mission to the beacon was the most harrowing yet. The nebula played tricks on their sensors, and Locrian patrols appeared out of nowhere, forcing the crew to engage in desperate skirmishes. When they reached the beacon, Mina immediately went to work, her claws moving with frantic precision. Adrian and his team held the line, fighting off waves of Locrian soldiers who seemed to materialize from the swirling gases. Mina, we're running out of time, Adrian shouted as another explosion rocked the ground beneath them. She chirped sharply, her version of, I'm working on it. Finally, with a deafening hum, the beacon's light flickered and died. The Locrian soldiers faltered, their coordination unraveling without the beacon's guidance. Adrian grabbed Mina's arm. Let's move. They barely made it back to the scout ship, launching into the nebula just as the beacon's core went critical, engulfing the surrounding area in a blinding explosion. Back aboard the Resolute Dawn, the crew celebrated their victory, but Adrian couldn't shake the feeling of unfinished business. Mina confirmed that the beacon network was fully disabled, but the ancient threat it was meant to contain still loomed in the shadows. As Adrian stood on the bridge, watching the stars drift by, Mina approached him. She tapped her pad. "This isn't the end." "No," Adrian agreed. "But it's a start." Mina chirped softly, her gaze distant but determined. For the first time, Adrian saw not just an operative or a mischievous alien, but a kindred spirit, a fighter who would do whatever it took to protect the galaxy. Together, they turned their attention to the stars, ready to face whatever came next. The shuttle's descent burned against the twilight skies of Nyxora, a world suspended between dream and delirium. Marcus Kane stared out through the viewport, his jaw tightening as the first glimpses of the surface unfurled below. Rivers of luminescent light wound through a landscape of crystalline spires and sprawling forests that shimmered with hues no human eye had evolved to name. The air, he was told, carried an electric charge, a kind of unseen intoxication that the Cyrillith considered as vital as oxygen. He wasn't here for the scenery. "Ambassador Kane," a clipped, melodic voice broke through the silence. He turned to face Eris, his liaison for this impossible mission. She was human, or at least mostly so. Her skin shimmered faintly under the cabin lights, her irises flecked with motes of gold, betraying the subtle augmentations that came from years spent adapting to alien worlds. "First impressions are everything with the Cyrillith," she said, her gaze lingering on him. "They'll test you the moment you step into their presence. Expect them to poke and prod, not physically, but—" She tapped her temple meaningfully. "Psychically. They'll want to know what you're hiding." Marcus's lips quirked into a dry smile. "Let's hope they don't dig too deep, then." The shuttle jerked as it entered the final phase of descent. Outside, a sprawling palace loomed into view, a structure that seemed to defy physics, its towers twisting and spiraling into the heavens, their surfaces rippling like water under moonlight. The Cyrillith called it Calyx Eternum, the eternal bloom. It was more than a palace. It was a living organism, pulsing faintly with the energy of its inhabitants. The moment the shuttle touched down, Marcus felt it, a faint hum beneath his feet, resonating not just through the ground but through his body, like the first pluck of a taut string. It wasn't physical, it was them. The Cyrillith were already aware of him, their collective consciousness brushing against the edges of his thoughts, like the probing fingers of a stranger in the dark. He stepped out into a world that was almost too perfect, too precise. Every color, every sound seemed heightened to a near unbearable intensity. A warm breeze carried a symphony of scents, floral, metallic, and something indescribably sweet. He forced himself to focus as a procession of Cyrillith approached, their forms a dazzling blend of humanoid and ethereal. Their movements were fluid, their bodies wrapped in gossamer fabrics that shimmered like oil on water. At the head of the group was Lariah. Even among the Cyrillith, she was striking. Her skin glowed faintly with an inner light, her eyes an impossible shade of violet, flecked with silver. Her lips curved into a smile that was more predatory than welcoming. "Ambassador Kane," she said, her voice carrying an almost musical cadence, layered with psychic undertones that Marcus could feel in his bones. "A human, here, in the heart of Nyxora. It's almost quaint." Her gaze swept over him, appraising, dissecting. Marcus met her eyes evenly, refusing to flinch under the weight of her scrutiny. "I suppose quaint is one word for it," he said, his tone deliberately mild. Her smile widened, though her expression remained inscrutable. "You've come a long way to stand before us. But tell me, what do you think you'll accomplish here? Surely you don't believe your kind has anything to offer us." The others laughed softly, their voices blending into a harmonious, mocking melody. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the moment stretch, meeting each of their gazes in turn. Behind his calm demeanor, his mind worked furiously. The Cyrillith were testing him, as Eris had warned. But this was more than a simple power play. It was a challenge, a demand for proof that he belonged here. "I suppose we'll find out," he said at last, his voice steady. "But if there's one thing humans excel at, it's defying expectations." Lyraya's laughter was like the chime of crystal bells, light and sharp. Defiance is a curious word to choose, but I wonder. She stepped closer, the air around her charged with a subtle energy that Marcus could feel pressing against his skin. "Can you truly comprehend what it means to stand among us? To satisfy our standards?" The question hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Marcus didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he inclined his head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement without submission. "Perhaps," he said simply. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment something flickered across her face. Surprise, maybe, or a flicker of genuine curiosity. It was gone as quickly as it had appeared. She turned sharply, gesturing for him to follow. The procession moved into the palace, the interior a kaleidoscope of impossible geometry and pulsating light. Every surface seemed alive, shifting and reconfiguring itself in response to the movement of its occupants. As they walked, Marcus could feel the psychic pressure intensifying, the Cyrillith's collective consciousness pressing against his thoughts like a rising tide. He tightened his mental defenses, silently activating the neural implant embedded at the base of his skull. The device hummed to life, creating a subtle barrier that shielded his mind from the Cyrillith's probing. Ahead, Lyraya glanced over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. "You're quiet, Ambassador. Perhaps you're beginning to feel the strain?" Marcus allowed himself a faint smile. "I'm simply taking it all in. It's not every day one gets to walk through a living masterpiece." Her lips curved again, but this time the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Flattery won't save you, Marcus Kane, but I'll admit, you're not as dull as I expected." They reached a vast chamber at the heart of the palace, its walls lined with crystalline structures that thrummed with an almost imperceptible energy. Lyraya gestured for him to stand at the center, her expression suddenly serious. "Let us see, then," she said softly, her voice laced with both challenge and curiosity. "Let us see if your defiance is worth anything at all." The chapter ends as Marcus steps forward, his heart pounding, the weight of 1,000 unseen eyes bearing down on him. The crystalline chamber pulsed faintly, casting soft, ever-shifting light that bathed Marcus Kane in shades of sapphire and gold. Standing at the center, he could feel the weight of expectation pressing against him, not just from the room's assembled Cyrillith, but from the very walls themselves, alive with a subtle humming awareness. This was not merely a test of words. "Step forward, Ambassador," Lyraya said, her voice smooth but edged with a glint of challenge. She was seated on a high dais, flanked by 2 elder Cyrillith, whose expressions radiated an inscrutable mix of skepticism and amusement. Around them, the other nobles formed a semicircle, their flowing forms half-lit by the ambient glow, their gazes fixed on Marcus with a predatory intensity. He obeyed, his boots clicking softly against the translucent floor. Beneath him, the surface shimmered like liquid glass, revealing shifting patterns that seemed to respond to his every movement. He stopped as a sudden pulse rippled through the air, brushing against his mind like the first crack of thunder before a storm. "It begins," Lyraya murmured, her violet eyes gleaming. Marcus swallowed hard, steeling himself as the psychic energy in the room coalesced, folding in on itself and surging toward him. It wasn't just a presence, it was a pressure, a deeply invasive force that sought to unravel him, to strip away the carefully constructed walls of his mind. He clenched his fists at his sides, activating the neural implant embedded in his skull. The device buzzed faintly, a stabilizing counterforce pushing back against the Cyrillith's probing tendrils. The room seemed to notice. The hum grew sharper, the pulses faster, as though the collective consciousness of the Cyrillith were adapting, testing him for weaknesses. Marcus felt sweat bead on his brow as Lyraya's voice cut through the tension. Impressive. Your little human device is holding. For now. She leaned forward slightly, her tone almost playful. But let's see how long you last when the stakes are raised. Without warning, the room's energy shifted, the subtle probing morphing into a sudden overwhelming surge. It was as though the weight of 100 voices, 1,000 thoughts, were crashing into him all at once. The air seemed to thrum with soundless vibrations, filling his ears with an unrelenting static that was almost deafening. He staggered but caught himself, his breathing ragged. Through the haze of psychic noise, he caught glimpses, fragments of images and emotions bleeding into his thoughts. A woman's laughter, haunting and familiar. The tang of salt air on an unnamed shore. The weight of failure pressing against his chest, suffocating. They weren't his memories. The realization struck him like a bolt of lightning. The Cyrillith weren't just testing him. They were trying to implant something within him, weaving their own memories and emotions into the fabric of his mind. Enough! Marcus's voice cut through the haze, sharp and commanding. His implant surged in response, emitting a burst of counter-energy that rippled through the chamber like a shockwave. The Cyrillith recoiled slightly, their psychic tendrils retreating, though the pressure in the room remained palpable. For a moment silence hung between them, tense and electric. Then, Lyraya smiled, slow and predatory. "You resist well, Ambassador," she said, her tone carrying a note of genuine intrigue. "But resistance is not enough. You came here to prove your kind's worth. Show us, then, what lies beneath your defenses." Marcus hesitated, his mind racing. He had prepared for this, of course, spent weeks honing his neural interface, training himself to channel human creativity and emotion through the Cyrillith's psychic medium. But he had no way of knowing if it would work. No human had ever attempted such a feat before. And then there was the risk. To open himself fully to the Cyrillith's network meant exposing his innermost thoughts, his fears, his vulnerabilities. It was a dangerous gamble, one that could leave him mentally shattered if the Cyrillith chose to exploit his weaknesses. But he was out of options. Taking a deep breath, he reached up and tapped the small control panel embedded behind his ear. The implant whirred softly, shifting modes as it began to broadcast his neural patterns outward, forming a bridge between his mind and the Cyrillith's collective consciousness. The response was immediate. The energy in the room surged again, but this time it wasn't invasive. It was curious, exploratory. Marcus felt it brushing against the edges of his thoughts, sifting through the layers of his mind like a diver skimming the surface of an uncharted sea. And then he pushed back. Focusing his thoughts, Marcus summoned the most vivid memories he could muster. He projected images of Earth's vast, untamed landscapes, the roaring cascades of Niagara Falls, the golden sprawl of the Serengeti at sunrise, the quiet stillness of an ancient redwood forest. He infused the images with raw emotion, awe, wonder, longing. The effect was immediate. The Cyrillith recoiled, their perfect composure faltering as their collective consciousness absorbed the torrent of sensory input. For a species accustomed to perfection, the raw, unfiltered chaos of human emotion was like a jolt of electricity. Lyraya's eyes widened, her previously serene expression breaking into something that almost resembled shock. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice tinged with something Marcus couldn't quite place. Fear, perhaps, or awe. "This," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the strain, "is humanity." The room fell silent, the psychic hum subsiding as the Cyrillith retreated, their auras flickering with uncertainty. For the first time, Marcus felt the balance of power shift, however slightly, in his favor. But as the tension ebbed, a new question arose, unspoken but heavy in the air. What had the Cyrillith seen in Marcus's mind that had shaken them so deeply? Lyraya recovered quickly, her usual composure slipping back into place like a mask. "An intriguing display, Ambassador," she said, though her voice lacked its usual cutting edge. She stepped closer, her gaze boring into him. but intrigue alone won't earn you our respect. The chapter ends with Lariah issuing a final challenge. A private audience in the palace's inner sanctum, where Marcus must confront not just the Cyrillith's expectations, but the deeper mysteries of their culture and his own limits. The air in the palace's inner sanctum was heavier, denser, as if it carried the weight of centuries. Unlike the outer chambers with their crystalline grandeur, this space was austere. A single circular room with walls of smooth, dark obsidian that seemed to drink in the faint light emanating from the floor. The silence was profound, broken only by the faint hum of energy that had become a constant backdrop in Nyxora. Marcus Kane stood at the threshold, his heart pounding, as Lariah gestured for him to step forward. Her usual air of amused detachment had been replaced by something colder, sharper, as if she were peeling away yet another layer of pretense. "You've surprised us, Ambassador," she said, her voice quieter now, almost contemplative. "Few outsiders possess the resilience to withstand our trials, much less to challenge us on our own terms. But resilience is not enough." Marcus stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over its stark emptiness. In the center stood a pedestal, its surface shimmering with a faint, rippling light. A single object rested atop it, a crystalline orb, perfectly smooth, its core flickering with an inner fire that shifted through shades of blue, green, and gold. "What is this place?" Marcus asked, his voice echoing faintly in the chamber. Lariah's lips curved into a faint smile, though her eyes remained unreadable. "This is the Nexus. It is the heart of our psychic network, the place where our collective consciousness converges. It is where truths are revealed." Marcus felt a prickle of unease as she circled him, her movements deliberate, predatory. "And what truth are we here to reveal?" "That," she said, stopping before the pedestal, "depends on you." Without another word, she reached out, her slender fingers brushing against the orb. The room shuddered, the obsidian walls rippling like water as the energy in the air intensified. Marcus staggered, his implant buzzing in protest as a wave of psychic force surged through him. When he opened his eyes, the chamber was gone. He stood in a vast expanse of shifting light, the boundaries of which seemed to stretch into infinity. The ground beneath his feet was solid but invisible, giving the unsettling impression that he was suspended in midair. All around him, fragments of images flickered in and out of existence, scenes of alien landscapes, faces he didn't recognize, and moments of raw, unfiltered emotion. Lariah's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. "This is the Nexus in its purest form, a mirror of the mind. It will show you what you are, Marcus Kane, and what you are not." Before he could respond, the images coalesced, forming a scene so vivid it felt like reality. He was standing in a sterile laboratory, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic. Scientists moved around him, their faces obscured by masks and visors, their voices a murmur of technical jargon. In the center of the room was a cylindrical chamber, its surface frosted with condensation. Marcus's breath caught as he stepped closer, his reflection distorted in the glass. Inside the chamber was a figure, human, yet not entirely. Its form was too perfect, its features too symmetrical, its eyes closed as if in slumber. "What is this?" Marcus demanded, his voice shaking. The scene shifted abruptly, the laboratory dissolving into a swirl of light and shadow. In its place appeared a memory, his memory. He was back on Earth, standing in a dimly lit conference room, his superiors seated around a long table. Their faces were sharp with tension, their voices clipped as they outlined his mission. "You're not just representing humanity," one of them had said. "You're proving that we belong in this galaxy. Failure is not an option." But there had been more, hadn't there? Something they hadn't told him. Something hidden beneath their carefully chosen words. The memory fractured, splintering into fragments that swirled around him like shards of glass. Voices whispered in his ears, too faint to understand, yet laden with meaning. "You are not what you think you are, Marcus Kane." Lariah's voice cut through the chaos, sharp and cold. You carry a secret that even you are unaware of. Shall we uncover it together? Marcus clenched his fists, his mind reeling as the fragments coalesced into a new scene. He was back in the Nexus chamber, but this time he wasn't alone. Standing across from him was a figure identical to himself in every detail, down to the faint scar on his left cheek. The double tilted its head, studying him with an expression that was eerily detached. "Do you know what you are, Marcus?" it asked, its voice a perfect echo of his own. Marcus stepped back, his heart pounding. "What kind of game is this?" "No game," Lariah said, materializing beside the doppelganger. Her expression was unreadable, her violet eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent a chill down his spine. "The Nexus reveals truths, Marcus, even the ones you've buried deep." The double stepped forward, its gaze locking with his. "You were designed for this," it said. "Built to bridge the gap between human and Cyrillith. You're not just a diplomat, Marcus. You're an experiment." The words hit him like a physical blow. He staggered, his mind reeling as memories, fractured, incomplete, rose unbidden to the surface. The countless tests, the neural conditioning, the quiet conversations he wasn't supposed to overhear. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's not possible." "And yet," Lariah said softly, "here you stand." The chapter ends as Marcus collapses to his knees, the weight of the revelation threatening to crush him. Around him, the Nexus begins to pulse with a chaotic energy, the boundaries of the space fracturing as his mind struggles to reconcile the truth. The chamber flickered in and out of focus, reality bending and shifting under the weight of Marcus's revelations. He knelt on the cold, translucent floor, his breath coming in short, sharp gasps. The memories clawed at his mind, jagged edges tearing through the fragile veil of certainty he'd constructed around himself. Experiment. The word echoed in his mind like a curse, its weight threatening to crush him. Across from him, his doppelganger stood motionless, its expression unreadable. Lariah watched them both, her violet eyes alight with a mixture of curiosity and something darker, something resembling pity. "You feel it now, don't you?" she said, her voice soft but cutting. "The truth settling into the cracks of your consciousness. You've always suspected, haven't you, that there was more to you than even you understood." Marcus clenched his fists, forcing himself to steady his breathing. "If I was an experiment," he said, his voice rough, "then why don't I remember? Why keep it from me?" Lariah tilted her head, a faint smile playing at her lips. "Ah, the human mind. So fragile, so quick to fracture under the weight of knowledge. Perhaps they thought you would perform better if you believed you were whole." The double spoke then, its voice identical to Marcus's but devoid of emotion. "They erased what they deemed unnecessary, memories of your conditioning, your enhancements, your true purpose." It stepped closer, and Marcus felt an unnatural chill radiating from its form. But the Nexus does not allow lies to persist. It shows what is, not what is wanted. Marcus staggered to his feet, his gaze darting between the doppelganger and Lariah. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded. "What do you gain from breaking me?" Lariah's expression shifted, the faint smile fading. "Breaking you?" she echoed, her tone suddenly sharp. "No, Marcus Kane, this is not about breaking you. This is about remaking you." Before he could respond, the Nexus flared with a brilliant light, and the chamber dissolved once more. He was standing in a room he didn't recognize, its walls lined with sleek, futuristic equipment. Monitors displayed streams of data, and the air was filled with the hum of advanced machinery. At the center of the room stood a single, imposing figure, a man with silver hair and piercing blue eyes. Marcus felt his stomach lurch. He knew this man. "Dr. Ellison," he whispered, the name slipping from his lips unbidden. The figure turned, his gaze locking onto Marcus with a startling intensity. "Ah, Subject 47, Ellison said, his tone clinical. You're awake. Good. We have much to discuss. The scene shifted again, faster this time, the images coming in rapid succession. Marcus saw himself strapped to a chair, electrodes attached to his temples. He saw Ellison and his team observing him from behind a glass partition, their faces devoid of empathy. He heard snippets of their conversation, disjointed but unmistakable. Enhanced neural pathways. Optimized for psychic integration. Adaptation rates exceed expectations. A bridge, not an endpoint. And then, a single phrase that sent a chill through his entire being. The Cyrillith are only the beginning. The chamber reformed around him, the obsidian walls once again solid and unyielding. Marcus swayed, his knees threatening to buckle under the weight of the memories. "Do you see now?" Lyria asked, her voice softer than before. "Do you understand what you are?" Marcus looked at her, his eyes blazing with a mix of anger and determination. "I'm a pawn," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos inside him. "A tool created to manipulate your people, but that doesn't mean I have to accept it." Lyria's expression flickered, and for the first time, Marcus saw a hint of something human in her gaze. Regret, perhaps, or admiration. "No," she said, "it doesn't. But rejecting your purpose will not change what you've become." The doppelganger stepped forward again, its presence oppressive. "You must decide, Marcus. The path ahead is yours to choose. Will you fulfill the role you were designed for, or will you forge your own?" Marcus felt a surge of defiance rising within him. "I'll decide," he said, his voice firm. "Not them. Not you. Me." The nexus pulsed, the light within the crystalline orb growing brighter, as if in response to his resolve. The energy in the room shifted, the oppressive weight lifting slightly. But even as Marcus stood his ground, he felt the enormity of the choice before him. The memories he had uncovered hinted at a larger conspiracy, one that extended far beyond the Cyrillith. To embrace his purpose might mean securing the alliance that humanity so desperately needed, but at what cost to his autonomy? To reject it could free him from his creator's control, but it might also doom his mission and humanity's future. "You face a paradox," Lyria said, her tone almost gentle. "The greater good or your own truth? Which will you choose, Marcus Kane?" The chapter ends with Marcus standing before the crystalline orb, its light pulsating in time with his racing heartbeat. The choice looms before him, and for the first time, he feels the full weight of what it means to be human, and more. The crystalline orb shimmered in the dim light of the Nexus chamber, its pulses syncing with Marcus Kane's uneven breaths. Around him, the obsidian walls stood still, as if the room itself were holding its breath, waiting for his choice. The weight of possibility pressed down on him, but there was a new clarity in his mind, a thread of resolve woven from the revelations he had endured. He looked first at Lyria, whose usual aloofness had given way to an inscrutable stillness, and then at his doppelganger, its expression as empty and unyielding as the vast galaxy that stretched beyond Nyxora. "Choice," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the turmoil within. "It's what makes us human, not what we're made of, or even why we were made. It's what we choose to do with the truth." He stepped forward, placing a hand on the orb. The surface was cool to the touch, yet he felt a surge of energy ripple through him, an awakening of the neural pathways that had been dormant for so long. The Nexus responded, flaring with light as it drew him into its depths one final time. He stood in a space that was neither memory nor reality, a vast expanse of shifting stars and streams of light that felt alive with potential. From the void, figures emerged, shadowy representations of those who had shaped his path. Dr. Ellison's voice rang out first, cold and clinical. "You were built for purpose, Marcus. A bridge to unite what cannot be united." Next came his own voice, fractured and uncertain, echoing his doubts. "But what if the purpose is flawed? What if the bridge leads nowhere?" And then, to his surprise, Laraya's voice joined the chorus, soft but resolute. The purpose is only as flawed as the one who carries it. Choose wisely, Marcus Kane, for your choice will resonate far beyond you. The light shifted, and Marcus saw two paths stretching before him. One glowed with a cold, mechanical precision, a future in which he embraced his design and fulfilled the role his creators had envisioned. The alliance would be forged, humanity would gain a foothold among the stars, and yet, something vital would be lost. The other path was darker, more uncertain, its edges frayed with possibility. To walk this path meant rejecting the constraints of his programming and forging a new destiny, not just for himself, but for the fragile connection he had begun to form with the Cyrillith. It was a path fraught with risk, but it was also undeniably human. Back in the Nexus chamber, Marcus's grip on the orb tightened. The light around him pulsed brighter, and he felt the weight of the room's collective consciousness pressing in. "I reject them," he said aloud, his voice firm. "Not just the Cyrillith's scorn, but my creator's control. I choose to be something neither of you expect, something new." The Nexus reacted violently, the room trembling as the orb flared with a blinding light. Laraya stumbled back, her psychic connection to the Nexus flickering, her violet eyes wide with astonishment. The doppelganger froze, its form destabilizing, the perfect image of Marcus fracturing into shards of light. "What are you doing?" Laraya demanded, her voice sharp with a mix of fear and awe. Marcus turned to her, his expression resolute. "I'm choosing humanity, not just my species, but what it means to be human, to be flawed, to be free, to connect." The orb pulsed one final time, and the Nexus collapsed inward, its energy surging into Marcus. He felt the collective consciousness of the Cyrillith flood through him, a kaleidoscope of memories, emotions, and truths far older than humanity. For a brief moment, he was everything: human, Cyrillith, and something more. And then the light faded. When Marcus opened his eyes, he was back in the Nexus chamber, but the oppressive weight of the room was gone. The crystalline orb lay shattered at his feet, its light extinguished. Laraya stared at him, her expression unreadable. "You severed the Nexus," she said, her voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Marcus nodded. "I've given you back your freedom. The Nexus isn't just a tool, it's a chain. You've been so entwined in your collective consciousness that you've forgotten how to be individuals. Maybe now you'll remember." Laraya's gaze softened, and for the first time, Marcus saw vulnerability in her. "And what of your people? The Alliance?" Marcus interrupted her with a faint smile. "The Alliance will be built on understanding, not manipulation. If the Cyrillith choose to connect with us, it will be because we've earned it, not because we've forced it." Laraya studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Perhaps there is more to your kind than I thought, Marcus Kane." In the days that followed, the Cyrillith Palace buzzed with activity. News of the Nexus's destruction spread quickly, and with it came a shift in the Cyrillith's attitudes. The arrogance and detachment that had defined their interactions with other species began to give way to curiosity and introspection. Laraya remained at Marcus's side, her sharp wit tempered by a newfound respect. Together they began the delicate work of rebuilding, not just the alliance, but the trust between their peoples. As Marcus prepared to leave Nyxora, he stood with Laraya on one of the palace's crystalline balconies, the alien sky shimmering with its eternal aurora. "You've changed us," she said quietly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "And yourself." Marcus nodded, the weight of his journey settling on his shoulders. "Change is what makes us human, or Cyrillith. It's what gives us hope." Laraya turned to him, a faint smile on her lips. "You're full of surprises, Ambassador Kane. Perhaps that's what will satisfy us after all." As he boarded his ship and left Nyxora behind, Marcus felt a sense of closure. He had confronted his past, forged his own path, and reminded two species of what it meant to be truly alive. The journey had been grueling, but it had also been worth it. For in the end, it wasn't about satisfying others. It was about discovering himself.